Once upon a time, in a distant kingdom, there was a king and a queen. The king was handsome and kind, loved by everyone. However, the true ruler of the kingdom was the queen. Before becoming queen, she had worked in the kitchen and lived in poverty. But she was very beautiful, witty, and excellent at playing Scrabble. This is why the king fell in love with her and married her. The king loved the queen very much, but she was always afraid that someone more beautiful than her would come along. To ensure she was the fairest of them all, the queen owned a magical mirror that could answer any question. Every day the queen would ask, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And the mirror would always answer, "You, my queen, are the fairest of them all." One day, when the queen asked her usual question, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" the mirror gave an unusual answer. The mirror said, "You are very beautiful, my queen, but the fairest of them all is Snow White." The queen was stunned and asked the mirror about Snow White. The mirror explained, "Snow White works in the kitchen, with skin as white as snow, lips as red as a rose, and hair as black as night." The queen became angry and jealous because this young girl was more beautiful than she was. She felt frightened and anxious that she would lose everything. This fear made her heart cold and cruel. The queen ordered a huntsman to find Snow White and take her into the deep forest, where she would never return. The huntsman led Snow White into the forest, but when they reached the spot, he couldn't bring himself to kill her because he felt pity for her. Instead, he told Snow White to run far away and never come back. Left alone in the desolate forest, Snow White began to run all morning. She was tired, hungry, and covered in mud, with her white skin and rosy face now dirty. As night fell, Snow White discovered a small cottage and decided to take shelter. She entered and saw a warm fire and a table full of dirty dishes. Hungry and exhausted, she ate a loaf of bread and drank a bottle of milk, then sat by the fire to warm herself. After that, Snow White fell asleep. When she awoke, she found herself in the house of 7 dwarfs. Snow White woke up and saw 7 dwarfs standing around her. One of the dwarfs angrily asked, "Who are you?" Another one, fearful, said not to scare her. After asking her and learning that she had nowhere to go, Snow White asked if she could stay. The dwarfs discussed and agreed, but with one condition: she had to help them wash dishes, as they hated doing it. Snow White happily agreed and began living with the dwarfs. Every morning when the dwarfs left for work, they always reminded her, "Be careful, don't open the door to anyone." Snow White worked diligently, washing dishes for them every day. She was happy to have a new home and feel safe with the dwarfs. However, the queen in the castle was still worried about Snow White. While Snow White lived peacefully with the dwarfs, the queen in the castle remained anxious. One day the queen asked the mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" The mirror answered as it always did, "You are very beautiful, my queen, but Snow White is now more beautiful than you." The queen, enraged, realized that Snow White was still alive. The mirror explained that she was living with the dwarfs in the forest and was currently more beautiful than the queen. The queen couldn't bear this truth. She immediately changed clothes and prepared to go out, determined to kill Snow White with her own hands. The queen disguised herself as an old woman selling fruit and set out to find Snow White. When she arrived at the dwarf's cottage, Snow White was sitting by the window. The old woman invited her to buy fruit and, using trickery, deceived Snow White into eating half of a poisoned apple. The queen, disguised as the old fruit seller, knocked on the dwarf's door. Snow White saw the old woman through the window, and though she was not allowed to open the door to strangers, she couldn't resist the delicious-looking fruit. The old woman invited her to try half of the apple, saying that if she ate half, the old woman would also eat the other half, to ensure it wasn't poisoned. Snow White felt reassured and opened the door, accepting the apple. She took a bite and immediately felt her body stiffen, then collapsed to the ground. The queen, now free of the old woman's disguise, saw Snow White lying motionless and smiled in satisfaction, then quickly left. When the dwarfs returned and found Snow White lying still on the floor, they were horrified. Though they tried to wake her, Snow White did not awaken. The dwarfs had no choice but to place her in a glass coffin next to a beautiful garden, hoping for a miracle. Snow White lay in the glass coffin for an entire year, through spring, summer, fall, and winter. One day, a prince from another kingdom was walking through the forest with his dog. As he passed by the glass coffin, he saw Snow White and was captivated by her beauty. The prince touched the coffin, but accidentally made it fall to the ground. Suddenly, a miracle occurred. The poisoned apple in Snow White's throat fell out, and she began to cough, waking up. The prince was overjoyed and quickly helped her. Snow White saw the prince and thanked him. When the dwarfs learned that Snow White had been revived, they were thrilled. The prince invited her and the dwarfs to his castle, where they all celebrated and lived happily ever after. When the queen stood before the mirror once more and asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" she did not expect the mirror to answer, "You are very beautiful, my queen, but Snow White is now the fairest of them all." The queen, horrified, knew that Snow White had come back to life and was even more beautiful than her. Rage filled the queen's heart, and she hurriedly threw a shoe at the mirror, smashing it into 1,000 pieces, and the magic of the mirror vanished. The queen felt dizzy and powerless, then collapsed to the ground, falling into a deep sleep. In her dream, she saw herself dancing in red-hot iron shoes, her feet in such pain that she could not stop. When she woke up the next morning, the queen felt different. The magic of the mirror was broken, and she no longer felt anxious or jealous, but instead felt a sense of peace. She went down the stairs and found the king, happily asking to play a game of Scrabble with him. While the queen felt the anxiety disappear, Snow White and the dwarfs were enjoying their new life full of happiness. The prince and Snow White lived in joy and harmony, while the dwarfs were invited to the prince's castle to attend a grand feast. Everyone rejoiced at the warm welcome and lived in prosperity. The prince, in a thoughtful gesture, gifted the dwarfs a dishwashing machine so they no longer had to do the task they hated every day. Before long, the castle was filled with laughter and joy, and everyone lived in happiness. As for the queen, after waking from her strange dream, she felt relieved and no longer haunted by jealousy. The magic of the mirror had been broken, leaving her powerless to harm anyone. She returned to the castle, no longer caring about Snow White. And so everyone, from the king to the queen, Snow White, and the dwarfs, lived happily ever after. Lesson: the story offers several valuable lessons. 1. Jealousy and insecurity. The queen could not accept the truth that someone was more beautiful than her, which led to cruelty and self-destruction. The story reminds us that jealousy can destroy our own happiness. 2. Generosity and friendship. Snow White and the dwarfs created a warm community where everyone helped and cared for each other. The lesson here is the value of friendship, sharing, and unity. 3. Patience and forgiveness. Snow White was not only patient, but also forgiving for the hardships she faced. In the end, she found true happiness through perseverance and kindness. 4. Power and freedom. The story shows that power and beauty cannot bring true happiness. The freedom from the burdens of jealousy and worry is more important than anything.